Hey, this is Russ from GFN Gaming.
And Emma.
And today we're going to be playing a game of Kill Team 125 points between the Thousand Suns and the Drukhari. I'm going to be using the Thousand Suns.
And I'm going to be using the Drukhari.
The mission we're playing today is the match play mission Recover Intelligence from the core manual, but with a few slight changes. Here's the board and the deployment zones. Each player scores victory points by holding objectives. The points up for grabs change depending on which deployment zone you set up in. Players get 1 victory point for each objective marker closest to their deployment zone, 2 victory points for controlling the center objective marker, and 3 victory points for each other objective marker that they control. It's slightly different to the core manual, but this is the game that we're playing today. That's the mission, so now let's go on to the teams, starting with the Drukhari. The Drukhari are going to be run as the Flayed Skull, which means they ignore obscured for shooting and intervening terrain for combat. Leading the Drukhari will be the Sybarite, armed with only the Splinter rifle to make sure he's nice and cheap. First specialist on the team is going to be the Combat Klaivex. He's a good choice with a 3+ save, 5 attacks at strength 4, -3 AP with the potential to do multiple damage. Next specialist is the Zealot Night Fiend. That's 5 attacks at strength 5 on the charge. The real benefit though is that -1 to hit in shooting and combat. Next specialist is the Cabalite Gunner with Dark Lance, and he's been taken as Sniper. Moving on to the non-specialists now, and we have 2 Mandrakes. Next up in the non-specialists we have an Incubus, also got that 3+ save, 3 attacks at strength 4, -3 with the potential for multiple damage. Next we have a Cabalite Gunner, and he's going to be armed with the Blaster. And finally, making up the rest of the list, we have 4 Cabalite Warriors, and they're all armed with Splinter rifles. That's the Drukhari list, so now let's move on to the denizens of the planet of the Sorcerers, the Thousand Suns. Terrible at naming planets, but excellent in the ways of the warp. Leading the Thousand Suns kill team will be a Twistbray. Despite having the chainsword and pistol, I am running him with the Tzaangor blades. The first specialist in the team will be the Rubric Marine Gunner. I'm taking him as heavy, and he will have the Soul Reaper cannon. Next specialist on the team will be the Rubric Marine with Warpflamer, and I'm taking him as my Demolitions specialist. The last specialist in the team will be the Aspiring Sorcerer. I'm taking him as combat so we can really do some damage with that 4 Stave. I've also given him a Warpflame pistol. First non-specialist in the team is going to be another Rubric Marine. He is armed with a Warpflamer also, and I've given him the Icon of Flame. Finishing off the Thousand Suns list, I have 5 Tzaangors. Ignore the models, they're all Tzaangor blades. Those are the teams, let's start the game. Turn 1 deployment roll. Thousand Suns get a 6, and the Drukhari get a 10. And with that, the Drukhari choose deployment zone B. With such a fast team, the Drukhari have really put themselves in a good position to spread out as soon as the game begins, and they've got their Sybarite already kind of out of line of sight, looking to stay there mainly. Quite a challenge for the Thousand Suns already, being an objective-based game, and they're quite slow. I'm trying to spread my threats equally, but I could get easily countered by the fast-moving Drukhari. I've got a lot of Tzaangors, however, that are going to move forward and try and tangle up the fast-moving Drukhari. Turn 1 initiative roll. Thousand Suns get a 6, and the Drukhari get an 8. Drukhari are going first. Turn 1 movement phase, starting with the Drukhari. Darkland Sniper is just going to move to objective 3. One of the Mandrakes is going to follow the Sniper, heading out towards objective 3. As predicted, the Sybarite is going to be hiding away out of line of sight. The Mandrake on the left flank is going to move towards objective 2. And he's going to take one of the Cabalite Warriors with him. Cabalite Gunner with a Blaster is going to move forward and grab some cover. He's also going to take a Cabalite Warrior with him. Klaivex is going to move towards objective 5 behind this big line of sight blocking terrain piece. And his little Incubus henchman is going to go with him. Cabalite warriors here are just going to shuffle to get some line of sight while still keeping a little bit of cover. You're crowding me, Dennis. Move back.
Oh, I'm sorry, Trev.
Don't have enough tokens for a full Drukhari list, so this is for all of them. And then the Night Fiend is also going to move forward towards Objective 2. And that's the movement phase for the Drukhari. Here's a quick recap. Seeing the maneuverability of the Drukhari here, they managed to get all the objectives they wanted to while still being able to shoot because they haven't had to advance. They have multiple models holding all their objectives, making sure they're safe. Thousand Sun's turn now, and the leader Twistbray is going to move on to Objective 1. Warpflamer Demo Specialist is going to advance, gets a 5 and moves towards the left flank. The Warpflamer with the icon of flame is also going to advance, getting a 4 and moves to Objective 2. The Tzaangor is just going to move forward within range of Objective 5. First charge of the game, Tzaangor's going into the warrior. Overwatch first, misses both, but the charge is failed. Still going to move forward though. Again, within range of Objective 5. Doubling up bodies on objectives, the Tzaangor's going to move to Objective 2. Tzaangor's going to move towards Objective 5, making sure he's within range so that the Thousand Suns will now hold this objective. Heavy Gunner has a few shots he can make, so he's just going to ready. Last Tzaangor is just going to move forward, again grabbing a little bit of cover. Aspiring Sorcerer initially just moves here, checks range, and I'm going to advance instead, gets a 6 and he's going to go here, making sure the blaster is the closest model. And that's the end of their movement. Here's a quick recap of what happened. Not as quick as the Drukhari, they've had to make use of their advance rolls, however they've only really got 3 models that can shoot, 2 of which are assault anyway. They outnumber the Drukhari on Objective 5 and hold both of their home objectives. Although the Thousand Suns have pressed forward, they've managed to keep most of their high value targets out of line of sight. However, the Drukhari have set up some good shooting lanes, behind which is the combat punch of the Klaivex, Incubus and Mandrakes. Making up for their lack of speed, the Thousand Suns now get their very own phase, the Psychic phase. I think the icon of flame is out of range, which is why I don't do it, but anyway we'll start with the Aspiring Sorcerer Sybarite into the blaster. Manifesting on a 5, and I get an 11, questionably, but Emma says it's definitely an 11, not a cocked eye, and to go ahead. This means it's D3 mortal wounds instead of just the 1, but it's still just the 1. Fails the 6 up, feel no pain. Rolls a 5 on the injury roll, so the blaster is taken out of action. Good start for the Thousand Suns, and we move on to the shooting phase. Only 1 readied model, so we're going to start with a heavy Rubric Marine with the Soul Reaper cannon, and he's going to fire into the Cabalite warrior here. Going to use 1 CP for more bullets to get an extra shot. 4 shots base with an extra 1 because of more bullets, hitting on 5s. That's an unlikely 4 hits, strength 5 so wounding on 3s. No armor save, so straight to the 6 up, feel no pain. Ooh, so close. But with 1 going through, it's still an injury roll. And on a 2, it's just a flesh wound. So after all those hits and wounds with the Soul Reaper cannon, it's just a flesh wound on the Cabalite warrior. Thousand Suns have no one left to shoot, so we move on to the Drukhari, and the Dark Lancers going first. Can't draw a line of sight to the Heavy Gunner, so we're going to fire at this Tzaangor. Because he's moved and it's heavy, it's going to be 1 shot, hitting on 4s. Gets a 1, but he can re-roll because he's Sniper, and it's a hit on a 6. It's a failed wound on a 1.
I really don't want the Dark Lance to have done nothing, so I'm going to use a reroll.
And it's still a 1. Fails to wound. Moving away from the train wreck that was the Dark Lance, looking at these warriors. Plenty of options for half-range shots. We're going to go for this Cabalite warrior into the Tzaangor hiding here. Because of Flayed Skull, it ignores Obscured, but because of his flesh wound, it's going to be 2 shots, hitting on 4s. Gets both, it's poison, so wounding on 4s. We do forget about Flayed Skull here, so we only count the 1 hit, and it fails to wound. Cabalite warrior next to him, firing into the same target. But misses both on a double 1. Mandrake can just see the Tzaangor to charge, so he's going to shoot through. Gets 1 hit with a 5. But it fails to wound with a roll of a 1. Mandrake can just see and is in range of the Tzaangor hiding by Objective 5, so he's going to shoot at him. Doesn't get the Flayed Skull, so it's going to be 2 shots hitting on 5s. And that's no hits. Moving on now, we've got the Cabalite warrior firing into the Tzaangor that charged. 2 shots hitting on 3s. Gets a hit, wounding on a 4. And on a 3, it's a failed wound. No models in combat and no one that can fail morale, so it's the end of turn 1. Thousand Suns get a point apiece for holding their home objectives, and they score 2 victory points for holding objective 5, having 1 more model than the Drukhari in range, for a total of 4 victory points. The Drukhari score 2 victory points holding both of their home objectives, which means the scores at the end of turn 2 are 4 to the Thousand Suns and 2 to the Drukhari. Moving on to turn 2. The ever ominous turn 2 initiative roll. Thousand Suns get an 8, Drukhari get a 6. Warpflamer Gunner's going to advance, gets a 2 and is going to move within range. Out of sight again, the leader's just going to ready. Warpflamer with the icon of flame is also going to advance. Tzaangor's going to move to where the gunner was, making sure he's out of line of sight but still holding objective 2. And the other Tzaangor's just going to follow him there, making sure we're doubling down. Trying a bit of a long charge, the Tzaangor here into the Darklands. Misses on the Overwatch. Just fails on a 9. Those 3 CP are burning a hole in my pocket, so I'm going to re-roll. And I get an 8. It's not enough, but I'm going to move towards the sniper. Closest Tzaangor is going to charge everyone here. Overwatch from the Splinter rifle, but fails to hit. Gets a 4 and decides to go into the Kabalite warrior to leave room for his friend. Tzaangor behind him then declares a charge into the Klaivex, just getting in on a 5. Wanting to make sure he doesn't get outmaneuvered, the heavy gunner is going to move forward. And that leaves the combat aspiring Sorcerer who's going to move behind the Warpflamer on the left flank. And that's it for the Thousand Suns movement phase turn 2. Here's a quick recap. Trying to put a little bit of pressure on the Drukhari now. I've moved quite a lot of my Tzaangors into combat around that objective 5. Still holding both of my home objectives, although with this movement I have now sacrificed objective 2. Turn 2 for the Drukhari now, and they are taking advantage of the Warpflamer's short range, with the Mandrake and Night Fiend moving just out of range. Kabalite Warrior is going to ready, as is the Sniper Darklance. Same thing that happened on the left flank, the Mandrake's going to move out of range of the Flamer. My low advance rolls here are coming back to haunt me. The Incubus then successfully charges into the Tzaangor. Kabalite Warrior is going to move here to get line of sight on the Flamer and the Tzaangor. And with plenty of targets, this Kabalite Warrior is just going to tuck in here. And the Sybarite leader, still out of line of sight, is just going to ready. Here's a recap of the movement phase. A lot of repositioning to get out of range of the Warflamers while still being in range themselves. At the moment, Emma and her Drukhari hold objective 5 and both of the objectives in her own deployment zone. Some short advance rolls and some fast Drukhari and my Rubric Marines are completely outpositioned, but I still have the Psychic phase. Got some melee happening in the middle of the board, but I don't fancy the Tzaangor's chances. Moving on to the Psychic phase now, and Emma has positioned it so the Kabalite Warrior is the nearest target. And even if I kill him, the Mandrake's still holding the objective. Cybolt goes off on a 5. And the Warrior fails a 6-up Feel No Pain. But he is obscured, so on the roll of a 4, it's just a flesh wound. In range with the icon of flame, so we're going to see if that goes off. Nearest target would be the sniper. Goes off on a 6. Does fail the Feel No Pain, but Emma's got 3 CP, so she's going to use one. Oh, and it's close, but it still fails. On the roll of a 2, it's just a flesh wound, but if I can get rid of him, I claim the objective, so I'm going to use a reroll. And on a 5, he's taken out of action, and if that Tzaangor survives, he's got the objective. That's the end of a successful Psychic phase for the Thousand Suns, and we move on to the Shooting phase. No readied options for the Thousand Suns, so we move on to the Drukhari. 2 shots from the Kabalite Warrior into the Flamer, hitting on 4s because of the flesh wound. Gets 1. Needs 4s to wound, gets a cocked die. And fails on the reroll. Warrior's now fired. No targets for the Sybarite leader. Everyone for the Thousand Suns is out of range apart from the heavy Soul Reaper cannon, so he's going to shoot now. Trying to take out models that can target the Tzaangor by objective 3, I'm going to shoot at the Mandrake. Because of the -1 to hit a Mandrake, I need 6s and I don't get any. Nothing left for the Thousand Suns to do now, it's just going to be all Emma and her Drukhari.
Put the kettle on, I'll take it from here. Starting over here, the Mandrake is going to fire his Bale Blast into the Flamer. 2 shots, hitting on 3s. Both hit. Should have rolled these one at a time. One fails to wound and the other wounds on a 6, so that's a wound and a mortal wound. Just a flesh wound on a roll of a 1, but I'm going to re-roll it. And on the roll of a 4, he's taken out of action. Which means the Aspiring Sorcerer is all alone with my Mandrake and my Night Fiend. And that Night Fiend is now going to fire into the Aspiring Sorcerer. Just over half range, so needing 4s. Needing 4s to wound, but hoping for a 6. And it's a fail on a 1. Firing with these guys first, hoping the warrior can finish off the Tzaangor so the Mandrake can fire at the Warpflamer. Hits twice with a double 6, 4s to wound, and gets 1. 5 up Invun, fails it on a 1. If he survives, Russ gets that objective and 3 victory points, so he's going to use a reroll, and the Jammy Git gets it on a 5. I need him dead, so the Mandrake is going to fire into him. The tension is high, this could mean a lot of victory points. And they both miss! Oh, this is terrible for the Drukhari. I'm forced to use Fire and Fade here for 1 CP, which means I can move a model after it shoots. So I'm going to move the Mandrake that's just fired onto Objective 3 to stop him getting those victory points. Final bit of shooting, the warrior's going to fire at the gunner. Hits on a 5, but it's a failed wound on a 1. So the shooting phase is over, onto the fight phase, and I'll pass you back to Russ.
Looking at this big mess of combat here, and going first are the Thousand Suns, so the Tzaangor is going to attack the Klaivex. Remember, they all have the Tzaangor blade, so this is going to be 2 attacks, hitting on 3s. Hits twice, strength 4, so it's going to be wounding on 3s. 2 wounds at -1 AP, so it's a 4-up save. And the Klaivex makes both of his saves. Incubus is now going to strike the other charging Tzaangor. 3 attacks, hitting on 3s. And wounding on 4s. Again, should have slow rolled it, but that's 1 failed wound and 1 that's now damaged 3, -3 AP. Fails the 5-up Invun. And with that, the Tzaangor is taken out of action before he can strike. I lost the footage, but embarrassingly the Klaivex doesn't get rid of the Tzaangor. Onto the morale phase, and still no one's eligible to fail, so it's on to the scores. The Thousand Suns hold both of their home objectives, scoring 2 victory points for a new total of 6. The Drukhari hold one of their home objectives, and they hold the central objective for a total of 3 victory points, bringing their grand total to 5. It's a close game, only 1 point in it. Emma and her Drukhari have 5 points, and me and the Thousand Suns have 6 as we move into turn 3. Turn 3 initiative roll, Thousand Suns get a 9 and the Drukhari get a 10. Moving for the Drukhari, the Mandrake can't fail the charge, so he's just going to move in. And the Sybarite charges in also, getting an 11. Cabalite Warrior is going to move to contest Objective 1. The Incubus is now going to charge into the leader, just getting it with a 7. The Cabalite Warriors near Objective 5 and the cargo containers are both going to ready, as is the one on Objective 4. The Night Fiend declares a charge against the Aspiring Sorcerer, fails the first charge but gets a reroll through power from Pain, fails again but it's going to move forward. Mandrake declares the same charge and makes it on an 11. That's the Drukhari movement phase. Here's a quick recap. The way Emma's moved this turn, she's still holding both her home objectives and currently is holding the central objective. There's also a good chance if the Incubus can kill the leader that she'll get 3 victory points for holding Objective 1. Thousand Suns movement phase, and the Warpflamer is going to move towards Objective 3 to contest it and also have range on the Cabalite Warrior. The Tzaangor on Objective 2 is just going to ready. This Tzaangor is going to move back to help contest Objective 5. Heavy Gunner is going to move to Objective 2 and get some line of sight. And that's it for the movement phase for the Thousand Suns. Here's a quick recap. Not a lot of movement this turn, but there weren't a lot of options. Currently they're only holding their Objective 2, and Objectives 1 and 5 are both currently contested. In a desperate attempt to save the leader, the Thousand Suns are going to spend 1 CP at the end of the movement phase for Malicious Familiar. It targets an enemy model within 1 inch of your leader, and on a 4+, it suffers a mortal wound. On a 4+, my Gribbly Familiar bites the ankles of the Drukhari Incubus. The Feel No Pain is failed, so it's on to the injury roll. And on the roll of a 5, this Familiar is not just malicious, but he's an absolute unit. Death by Gribbly Familiars. Once I'd finally stopped dancing, we were able to move on to the Psychic phase. This time I'm going to start with the icon of Flame just to see if I get lucky again. Fails to go off on a 4, ah well. With that done, we're going to move on to the Aspiring Sorcerer, who's going to fire his Cybolt at the Mandrake. It's about the only time he's not -1 to hit. Manifests on a 7. Fails to Feel No Pain. But on a 2, it's just a flesh wound, which we both forget about. Everyone gets a freebie, right? Kabalite Warrior is going to fire into the Flamer. But he misses on a 2. Next Warrior is going to fire, 2 shots hitting on 4s because of the flesh wound. Gets a hit. And it wounds as well. No AP and it's only 1 damage, so it's a 2-up save. All is dust to save the day. She's then going to use a CP for Fire and Fade to move the Kabalite Warrior out of range of the Flamer. To rub salt in the wound, she makes me do the movement because she's eating a snack. Kabalite Warrior fires at the Gunner. Gets a hit. And it wounds. And again, all is dust saves the Gunner. Warrior's now going to fire at the leader. Another chance to take objective 1. Hits twice. Just the 1 wound. Fails the 5-up invuln. I'm going to use a CP. Very jammy, but it's time to dance around the table again. It's finally time for me to shoot, so the Gunner's going to fire at this Warrior. Gets 3 hits, pretty good. Wounding on 2s now, just need to make sure I don't roll only 1s. And that horrendous roll moves us right on to the fight phase. Had a couple of successful charges this round, so we're going to work through them first, starting with the Drukhari's initiative. Moving on to the first combat, we have the Mandrake into the Aspiring Sorcerer. It's round 3, so Power from Pain gives everyone a +1 to hit in combat. 3 attacks should be hitting on 3s, but we forget about the flesh wound, so it's hitting on 2s. Wounding on 4s, so that's 2 that go through. Fails to save, so it will go to the injury roll. And it's just a flesh wound. Trying to take out a key target, Emma's going to re-roll it. And it's still just a flesh wound. Flesh wounded, but still alive. Moving over to the right flank now, and we're going to start with the Mandrake into the Tzaangor. 3 attacks, hitting on 2s. Gets 2 hits. And they both wound, looking for 5-up saves. Fails 1, so it goes to the injury roll. And he's taken out of action. Looks like I've got him a little too close, and the Mandrake consolidates into the Warpflamer. The Klaivex is now going to attack the Tzaangor. This is going to be 5 attacks, hitting on 2s, and wounding on 4s. Again, keep forgetting to slow roll these. Let's do the invuln saves. Invuln saves on the normal wounds, and on the 3 damage one. As the more experienced player, it's my fault we didn't slow roll, so I'm going to say that the 3 damage was the first one to go through. Turns out, he would have died anyway. With the Tzaangor dead, the Klaivex is going to consolidate towards the other remaining Tzaangors, making sure to be within range to score the objective. Let's just get this out of the way. Well, he did better than I thought he would. Time for the Aspiring Sorcerer to aspire no more. It's time to be. 3 attacks, hitting on 3s. Yikes. Oh, still gets 1. It's a wound on a 5. And it's all he needs. Fails the invuln, it's now D3 damage. 2, it's not bad, gets a Feel No Pain. Oof, so close, but it's one that goes through, so it goes to the injury roll. And on a 4, he's taken out of action. And that combat marks the end of the fight phase, and we move on to the morale phase. Starting with the Drukhari, and we're going to roll for the Kabalite Warrior with a flesh wound on objective 4. Has a leadership of 7 and is fine on the roll of a 2. Moving on to the Flesh Wounded Warrior by objective 5, and on a roll of a 2 he's also fine. Only model eligible for the 1000 Suns is the Aspiring Sorcerer, and on a roll of a 3 he's okay. That's the end of turn 3, let's look at the scores. Currently, the Thousand Suns are only holding objective 2 for 1 victory point, bringing their total to 7. The Drukhari are holding both of their home objectives for 2 victory points and the central one for an additional 2, bringing their total to 9. Let's move on to turn 4. Turn 4 initiative roll, the Thousand Suns get a 10 and the Drukhari get an 8. Aspiring Sorcerer is going to move back to objective 1. The Tzaangor hiding at objective 5 makes a successful charge onto the Mandrake at objective 3. Gunner's going to ready. Twistbray is going to charge the warrior. Overwatch fails and he makes the charge. That's it for the turn 4 movement phase for the Thousand Suns. Here's a quick recap. It's a bit of a desperate attempt to try and get objective 3, but at least now I'm holding objective 2 and currently objective 1. I would need to get very lucky in combat, but if I can take objective 3, it's worth 3 victory points. Klaivex is going to charge through the building into the Sorcerer, and on an 8 he gets exactly what he needs to get in base-to-base contact. Night Fiend Zealot's also going to charge, fails the first one but does get a reroll, and gets just enough to get into combat. Emma's making sure not to go base-to-base here though. Can't fail it, but the Sybarite's charging the Tzaangor. Needing to get bodies on the objectives, and this warrior charges in on an 11. And that's it for Emma's movement phase. Let's have a look at what's happened. With their charging models, they've managed to reclaim objective 3, and they now hold both of theirs, the central, and are in a good position to take objective 1. Having finished his dinner of Incubus Ankle, the malicious familiar is back to take out some more warriors. And it fails on a 1. He was so close to getting his own model. Moving on to the psychic phase now, and we're going to start with the Icon of Flames. Moving swiftly on, because of the way Emma's positioned these models, I have to now target the 2-wound Klaivex with my Cybolt. It goes off, and she fails the Feel No Pain, 1 wound down. Moving on to the shooting phase, and no one's eligible, so moving straight on to the fight phase. Starting with the Thousand Suns initiative, and the Tzaangor is going to try and take out the Mandrake. 2 attacks hitting on 4s because of the -1. Gets a hit, and it's going to be wounding on 3s. The Zealot Night Fiend is now going to pile in and attack the Aspiring Sorcerer. This is going to be 5 attacks on the charge, hitting on 2s. Strength 5 with Zealot, so wounding on 3s. Gets 1, -1, so a 4-up save. Emma's using a reroll to see if she can get another wound, but it's still just the 1. Building the suspense with flying dice, and the Aspiring Sorcerer makes his save. The Twistbray must do what the malicious familiar could not. Gets 1 hit, wounding on 3s. And it's a wound, -1, so it's a 6-up save, followed by a 6-up Feel No Pain. And he fails both. However, it's just a flesh wound. It now falls to the Klaivex to take out the Aspiring Sorcerer. Gets 3 hits, strength 4, toughness 4, so wounding on 4s. Just the 1, but it is -3 AP. And like a hero, he makes the save. We'll be returning to this combat soon, but first the Sybarite will try and take out the Tzaangor. Gets a hit with a 6, but fails to wound on a 2. Non-charged models and the Thousand Suns have the initiative. I mean, it makes sense, right? He's effectively a vacuum cleaner with a flamethrower sellotape to it. Mandrake striking back now, 3 attacks, hitting on 2s. All 3 hit, strength 4, toughness 4, so wounding on 4s. 2-up save with all his dust, or he does fail 1. And on the roll of a 3, it's just going to be a flesh wound. Warrior striking back now. Gets a hit. And it is a wound. Fails the invuln. But it's just a flesh wound. As I declare my attacks, Emma is going to use lightning fast reactions to make the Klaivex a -1 to hit, so now both of them are a -1 to hit. 1 attack into the Night Fiend, hitting on 4s. Wounding on 3s, 5-up invuln for the Night Fiend. It's a fail, so that's D3 damage, and it's the big 3. Still got to Feel No Pain though. fails all 3, so this is going to be 3 dice on the injury roll. And with that, he's taken out of action. 2 attacks on the Klaivex, hitting on 4s because of lightning fast reactions. Gets a hit, wounding on 2s. It's a failed wound on a 1, but I have exactly 1 command point left, so I'm going to use it. But it fails to wound on a 2. Starting the morale phase with the 1,000 Suns with the Aspiring Sorcerer. And on the roll of a 5, he is shaken. Not a great start. With each failure, it becomes harder to pass. Moving on to the Twistbray now. And on the roll of a 4, he's also shaken. With shaken models being unable to hold objectives, Objective 1 is now not contested. Warpflamer gets a 6, so he's definitely shaken. Klaivex doesn't need to take morale check, so as such, the Drukhari score 3 victory points for Objective 1. This warrior now. And on the roll of a 1, he does pass his morale as well. Warrior down here fails on a 5, gets to reroll, but it's still a fail. Last morale check's worth 2 victory points for the Drukhari. And even with a reroll, the warrior is shaken. After that big morale phase, let's have a look at the scores. These 3 models are broken for the 1,000 Suns and these 2 models for the Drukhari. What that means is at the end of turn 4, the 1,000 Suns still only hold 1 objective, getting 1 victory point, bringing their end of turn total to 8. The Drukhari have now claimed Objective 1 for 3 victory points, and they hold Objective 3 for 1, bringing their grand total to 13 at the end of turn 4. Rolling to see if the game continues, and on the roll of a 1 it does not, so at the end of 4 turns, the Drukhari and Emma are the winners. Thanks so much for joining me and Emma in what might be our last game of the current edition of Kill Team. We're both very excited by the new edition and can't wait to do some battle reports using the new rules for Octarius. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us in what might be the last episode for this current edition.
And we'll see you in the next video. Bye.